Hey guys, Svetlana Sotak here. Today I'd like to share my take on a 3D face mask. Now these masks are super quick and easy to make, but most of all, I find they're quite comfortable to wear. As you can see, they give a nice coverage over your nose and your chin, and you have enough space in the front so you don't feel like you cannot breathe. Let's start, shall we? Let's take a closer look at the mask we'll be working on. This is a 2-layer fabric mask, and I recommend you use only 100% quilting cotton to make these masks. You can either use the same fabric for both the outside and the inside of your mask, just as I did for this one, or you can use 2 different fabrics, one for the outside, one for the inside. Materials you will need for your mask. You will need 2 10-inch wide by 7-inch tall pieces of quilting cotton. You will also need 2 10-inch long pieces of elastic. I'm using a 1/4-inch wide elastic. You will of course need a cutting mat, ruler, and rotary cutter, and your sewing machine, iron, and your thread. Okay, so place your 2 quilting cotton pieces on your cutting mat. I like to line them up with the lines on my mat, as that helps with my cutting. And what we need to do now is cut out little triangle corners on each side of the mask, and we are cutting 2-inch triangles here. So cutting mat is really great for that we don't need to do any marking, because the markings are already here. So I will find a 2-inch mark right here, 2-inch mark here, join these with my ruler and cut. You see, and I'm doing both layers at once, as it saves on my work. Now, of course, if you are making more masks at once, you can totally stack up more fabrics and do this step. Again, we are going to cut out the corner here. So find 2-inch mark right here, 2-inch mark right here, join these and cut. And doing the same right here, 1 2-inch mark, 2-inch mark. And just make sure you measure well, so you don't cut your fabric wrong, because that wouldn't be good. All right, so this is what our panels look like, both the inside of the mask and the outside of the mask. Now place your panels right sides together, like that, match up all the edges, and use a few pins to hold the layers together. You don't need to use many, just a few will do. And now take your mask to your sewing machine and stitch all the way around, pivoting when you get to the corners here, all the way around, leaving about a 3-inch opening in the bottom seam, back stitching at the beginning and at end, and also make sure you use a 1/4-inch seam allowance. So here's what my mask looks like at this point. As I mentioned before, I started sewing right here, went all the way around the edges, using 1/4-inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and end, and I left an opening in the bottom seam of my mask, because this will be for turning it right side out. I also went ahead and pressed the bottom seam open. You don't have to worry about the rest of the seams, just the bottom one. Now I'm gonna take my fabric shears and trim these corners to make, it will make for a neater finished product when we don't have so much bulk in corners. Like that, just make sure not to snip into your thread, into your stitches, because that would be a problem. It would give you a hole in the mask. And if you were to cut it by accident, take it back to your sewing machine and restitch. All right, all the corners are now cut. Open your mask, reach inside and turn it right side out, like so. Now I'm going to place my finger inside the mask and go from the inside, just go along the seams, kind of pushing them out neatly, like so. Make sure everything is nice and pointy. And this way it also helps your seam stay nice and flat. Go smooth it out like that. Now take your mask to your ironing board and press really well using hot iron and steam. Now after pressing, this is what my mask looks like. As you can see, I still have the hole in the bottom seam right here where I turned the mask right side out. All the other edges are neatly finished like that. And what I'm going to do now is do a stitch right here along the bottom edge. And while stitching, I will close this opening in here. So use about 1/8 inch seam allowance and backstitch at the beginning and end. Stitch all the way across this seam and do the same stitch along the top seam. Again, using 1/8 inch seam allowance and backstitching at the beginning and end. Okay, I top stitched my mask along the bottom seam and the top seam, and I then took it to my ironing board, placed it right side down, and folded the top edge by 1 3/4 inches, pressed it, and folded the bottom edge up by 1 3/4 inches and pressed it as well. Make sure to use steam and a hot iron set on cotton setting so you get nice and crisp edges. And now I'm going to top stitch along these folded edges using 1/8 inch seam allowance, backstitching at the beginning and end. Clip all the threads like that. And this is what your mask looks like at this point. This is the front of the mask, back of the mask, like that. Now it's time to add our elastic for ear loops. So what I'm going to do is place it right here on the edge and fold it over by about 3/8 inch seam allowance. As you can see, I placed the elastic inside. It has enough room in there that it can move. And I'll just use a pin right here to hold this edge in place while I'm sewing. And again, use 1/8 inch seam allowance to stitch this little elastic fold over and backstitch at the beginning and end. Here is my one elastic, and I will add the other one using exactly the same instructions. Just fold it over right here. I'll pin it to hold the bottom edge in place, and I'll stitch using 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now I finished these little channels for my elastic, as you can see right here. And all we need to do is just stitch the elastic together so it forms loops for the ears, and we'll be all finished. And the way I like to do it is I measure 1 inch along one edge of the elastic. I just use a ruler on my sewing machine, and then I overlap my elastic by 1 inch right here. Now this is the measurement that works for me and for my family, but you should just give it a try and see what works for you. You might need to do it a little bit more or less depending on who you're fitting this mask. And then I overlapped it right here, and I'm going to stitch back and forth a few times to keep it in place. It's fine if it doesn't look perfect, because this part right here will be hidden. So what I'm going to do is push it nicely inside this channel like this, and I'm going to just stitch the other elastic closed. Make sure that you don't turn the elastic the wrong way, and then it will be twisted here. So just place it like that so it's nice and straight loop. And again, I'm going to stitch these two ends together. Again, just trim off the threads and pull it into the channel like that. And now the super magic part, turn it right side down, open these flaps, and fold your mask in half like that while pulling the flaps out. This will be your top flap, bottom flap right here. Pull it like that on both sides, line it up neatly like so. And I like to take my mask to a pressing board and just give it a good press so these top and bottom flaps stay out nicely, and you're all finished. Here's your mask. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and give a 3D face mask a try. Happy sewing!